Julia, thanks so much for coming on the show here today. Really excited to have you on. Could you start by just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yes. So thank you for having me on. First of all, this is such a full circle moment. And your podcast was one of the first podcasts I started listening to when I started my career as a college strength coach. So I appreciate you, and I value you putting out information out there for all of us to consume. And yeah, so I'm honored to be on. But a little bit about myself. I am a registered dietitian. I work with women to help them optimize the key hormones affecting their weight, mood, metabolism, menstrual cycle, energy. And we do this by nutrition and other lifestyle strategies. Prior to that, I was a college strength and conditioning coach and just made that transition. And now, have an online practice where I get to help women and share education, and I love it.
That's awesome. I love it. So talk to me. What got you into the world of physical preparation? Was it getting ready to play soccer or sports? Like, what got you into this space originally?
Yes. So grew up playing soccer. I was never the fastest or fittest. I was actually like the most unfit person on the team. And I remember there was this one specific game. I was bent over in the middle of the soccer game with terrible period cramps. My coach thought it was because I was out of shape, which I was. So it was, a combination of the two things. But
Sure.
Bent over in the middle of the game, my coach called me out after that game and was like, Julia, if you continue to do what you're doing, your soccer career is going to be done. And he was referring to like my lack of fitness and not prioritizing that. And obviously I was like, soccer was my life, wanted to play in college, like wanted to be Mia Hamm when I was younger, like I was all in. And so hearing that, I'm like, okay, I got to get my, butt into gear. And I spent every single day in the gym after that. I was full force, like, what can I do to get better? And that was when I was like 14, 15. So started diving into training, dialing in my nutrition, the best of my capabilities at that age. And I knew from that age, I wanted to be like a nutritionist and personal trainer. Had no idea what that looked like at the time. But anyway, fast forward, ended up getting a full ride to play soccer at the University of Arizona, came in as one of the like fittest people on the team as a freshman. I was that athlete who did every single thing written on the summer program. I did not skip anything. I was the best at following those directions because I loved it. Anyway, got introduced to the weight room in college, fell in love with the process of training, strength and conditioning, because first of all, when you're, that out of shape at the beginning, like everything works. And so all of a sudden I'm like, wow, this is amazing how much your body can transform, your performance can transform. And like that not only helped my confidence playing, but also outside of, training and playing soccer as well. So anyway, my strength coaches had a huge impact on my life in college. And I said, from that moment on, like if I can make this impact on even one person, like I've done my job. And so I spent every waking second I could in the weight room, just being a sponge to my strength coaches, learning as much as possible, and then became a strength coach after I got done playing soccer, like did my first internship that spring season. And the rest was history. Kind of just became obsessed with, learning as much as possible. That's every coach at the beginning. You're like, how much can I learn? There's so much to learn. I know nothing. Like I still know nothing,
That's awesome.
But
so,
we know a little bit more.
So what position did you play? I got to know, like what position did you play?
I played defensive center mid. So my job was see ball, get ball.
Okay. Yeah. No, I like that. and a decent amount of running. It's not like you're one of those that's out wide running up and down the field, but if you're not in shape, it's noticeable, right? Because generally something bad is going to happen if you're not running as much as you should.
Yes, exactly. You got to be in shape.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So collegiate strength coach, like you said, the rest they say is history, but it's not because you didn't stay there. right? And you've really evolved, and it's been cool to watch that evolution. So walk us through your career from, I think I'm going to be a collegiate strength coach and I'm going to learn everything about S&C, and talk to us about where you're at now. Like, give us that career path, because I think a lot of people that are listening to this are like, oh, Julia's got this awesome job and she works online and remote. So talk to us about that evolution and that career path that you've kind of carved out for yourself.
Yeah. So in college, my major was like to become a dietitian. So it was dietetics. Now I took chem and bio during my sophomore year during season, almost failed both. So I was like, okay, this career is not for me. I'm not smart enough. Like I saw my two roommates, who are still my best friends, like passing with flying colors. They're both physical therapists. I'm just like, okay, I'm not cut out for this. Nor do I want to go to medical school. Like, I want to be a college strength coach. I'm going to switch my, major. Anyway, ended up creating my own major, which is no surprise. So I studied nutrition and physiology without the sciences. Fast forward, I ended up having to take those, nutritional biochemistry, microbiology, all of those courses anyway to get into grad school. But after college, I was like strength coach 100%. Now, once I got into the field of college strength and conditioning coach, like as a strength and conditioning coach, it wasn't necessarily what I, envisioned it to be as an athlete going into the field, right? You see all the back end stuff, and it became more data driven. And I was very much like not the data driven. I didn't want to look into polar, like that just didn't light me up, So I would find myself watching YouTube videos of like nutritional biochemistry and substrate utilization and like all things nutrition. And I'm like, okay, it's time to shift and go back to school. Like it was just in my heart to go back, become a dietitian and dive into that role. And during grad school, getting my master's in nutritional biochemistry, I was very lucky and met a bunch of amazing humans who were already in this online space. Okay. And so I was like, wow, this is possible? What? So anyway, worst decision of my life, but also best decision of my life. Started a business, an online business while I was in grad school. Talk about a stress load. But I ended up putting out my first program in 2017. It was like a strength training program. Actually, it was a body weight program. Anyway, I saw it did really well. I saw what was possible in the space and I went all in. And I was like, this is it. And I knew nothing. I just kept learning and learning. Like, what do I need to know for this or this? And, you still kind of, everything just unravels as you move on to the next thing. But like everything is figure outable, and I just kept trying to sort out how I can make this business actually work for me online. And here we are.
Okay. So before we dive into the main topics of today, walk us through what an average day looks like, because you work online, right? And I do some online work, and I've been in the online space for a while now. I think a lot of times people perceive it as, oh, you create a couple reels, you sit back, you're just like collecting checks all day, Mai Tais at the pool. Talk to me about what a real day looks like working for yourself online.
Totally. So I do not set an alarm to wake up. So I allow my body to sleep in until it wakes up. I don't start calls until 11. So after I got out of the college setting, I'm not a morning person. And in the college setting, it's like you are up and at 'em first. And even as a coach, a lot of coaches, you have to train your clients in the morning because that's the only time they can. Exactly. Yeah. So I do have, a little bit of flexibility there that I acknowledge. But yeah, so everything starts at 11 in terms of my client load, on calls and all of that. And prior to that, I take care of any communication with messaging. My clients, that's my time to dive in and read and learn, work on the back end stuff, put out any fires that may have come up overnight. So I do all of that in the morning, start client calls throughout the day, and that can go anywhere from like 11 to 6, obviously spread out throughout the day. I'll train at some point in the middle. I'll film some videos in the middle of that. I don't necessarily have, a set structure of when I batch content, because I've noticed that for me, I have to feel on. Like if I'm not on, I'm going to come across not on, and I'm not going to film a video like that. I'll go on stories, of course, but so if I'm feeling more, introverted or whatever, I'm doing things behind the scenes. And then at night is when I hit my creative zone of genius. And that is when I have created every single essentially product or idea or course between the hours of like 10 p.m. and midnight. So,
oh, wow. Okay. So you're definitely like the PM chronotype. Yes. Like 100%. Trending later if possible. Yeah.
Yeah. So typical bedtime is like 12 to 8, 12:30 to 8:30.
Yeah.
That's kind of like and I used to feel so ashamed about that, because in the college setting, it's like they make you feel like, you have to be up and at 'em, and like early, like it's just so set in that like early is best vibe.
Yeah.
And I just did not fit that. And I used to feel guilty about it. And now I just own it because it works for me.
Yeah. Do you know Joel Jameson? I'm sure you know of him.
Of course. Yes. Okay. Oh, no, I haven't met him, but love his stuff.
Well, we'll have to fix that. But Joel and I, when we hang out, because I'm always going towards his time zone, and he is very PM chronotype based. Like by the time he's hitting his stride, it's like 10 or 11. I'm like yawning. I'm like, dude, I'm going to bed. And he's like talking to me about mitochondria and energy pathways. And I'm like, dude, like, this is awesome. Can we have this discussion in the morning? Because my brain is not there. So I totally get it. Okay. So let's dive in, because I have so many cool topics I want to talk to you about today. And I realize this first one is a big topic, but let's just go for it. Let's go in. So probably 70 to 80% of the listeners to this show, i.e. men, don't have a menstrual cycle, and probably don't put a ton of time and effort into thinking about how it impacts the training of their female clients and athletes. So for dummies like me, could you start by just outlining the various phases, and maybe more importantly, how we should adjust our training as a result of these various menstrual cycles and phases?
Yes. So huge question. And I'll kind of give a bird's eye view of the phases, and then we can, dial a little bit deeper into training and fluctuations, et cetera. So
for sure.
4 phases of the menstrual cycle: menses, follicular phase, ovulatory phase, luteal phase, in that order. Menses phase is day 1 of period until obviously your period is done. However, the follicular phase also encompasses the time of your period, in that it starts with your hormones are at its lowest level, and around day 3-ish, estrogen starts to rise. Estrogen peaks about 2 days before ovulation, and estrogen peaks to trigger an LH surge. And that LH surge triggers the release of an egg, which is ovulation. So ovulation is 1-day event. It is the main event of the menstrual cycle. And then after ovulation, your hormones start to dip, and that is when you enter the luteal phase. So right after ovulation, the luteal phase starts, which lasts about 2 weeks up until your period starts again. So within these 4 phases, you're getting a variety of fluctuations happening. So I kind of briefly just mentioned during menses phase, during your period, day 1 and 2, your hormones are at its lowest point. Estrogen starts to rise. We also get a peak in testosterone right before ovulation as well. It takes a little dip after ovulation, and then we start to build progesterone. Progesterone is the dominant hormone during the luteal phase. We also get another rise in estrogen, but the main focus is building that progesterone during the second half of your cycle, your luteal phase. And then a few days before your period starts again, your hormones take a dip, and that's what triggers the release of your endometrium lining shedding. so your period. So that's kind of the fluctuations of the menstrual cycle. Now, when we talk about training, I can talk about this forever, but essentially we are because of these hormone fluctuations, they are a woman's superpower, and we can use them to our advantage in terms of training adaptations and recovery. So during the first half of your cycle, day 1 and 2 of your period, you're going to find that most women are a little bit fatigued. They're shedding blood, like their energy levels are a little bit lower. So honor that for whatever they are feeling specifically. Once they get their energy back is a great time to go after it in the weight room, in conditioning, in sprints, in building strength, all of that, because estrogen supports muscle function, muscle recovery, glucose sensitivity, and also makes us more stress resilient. So we can take those stressors of training and adapt from them a lot better during the first half of the cycle than the second half of the cycle. During the second half of the cycle, when we're building progesterone increases our body temperature, our energy needs. It increases insulin resistance, at least at the level of the muscle, because we are putting that's traumatic, but we're putting a lot of effort into building our endometrium lining in the event of a potential pregnancy, whether or not you are trying to get pregnant. So glucose protein is going to building that nice and robust endometrium lining, and not so worried about recovering from exercise at the level of the muscle that we're working at, right? So that is something to consider during the second half of the cycle in terms of recovery, power output, all of that. And on top of that, rate of perceived exertion during the second half of your cycle, especially that week that progesterone's building and peaking, women do experience a higher level rate of perceived exertion. So that's when, you're lifting, you can lift like 300 pounds you can lift like 50 pounds during, the first half of your cycle. That same 50 pounds is going to feel like 300 during the second half of your cycle. At least it can. And it's not because you are decreasing your adaptations. It's not because you're getting weaker, which a lot of women, at least in the general population, experience. And then they just say, this isn't working. No, it's just your body's needs are changing during that time, and that's okay. It's just you just should modify your, training accordingly. So what that looks like is, as I mentioned, going intense, obviously utilizing recovery days between each high intensity days. And then during the second half of your cycle, dialing back the intensity. You can still lift. And this is a common theme that I'm seeing that is driving me bananas from other people talking about cycle syncing your workouts, who don't necessarily have a training background, but they say during your luteal phase, just, walk and do yoga. And it's you're not going to adapt from training if you're training 1 week out of the month, So just honoring, the individual of where they're at in their menstrual cycle, and adjusting and doing an undulating programming as you would normally do, but just, sync it to their cycle when they are naturally better at adapting during the first half, and then a little bit less better at adapting during the second half. So prioritizing recovery and not going for, PRs. And you can, and I will preface this and say the woman's body is capable of doing anything at any time, period. Especially competing, because your drive and motivation and adrenaline and all those things will trump all. But when you're dialing in your performance, you can, if you can, you would really support your female clients by honoring these natural hormone fluctuations throughout the month.
Yeah. Well, in some ways, it seems like it would almost make it easier to write a really solid training program if you know these things, right? You kind of know, okay, these are the 2 weeks where I can really push things. So maybe those are my higher volume or higher intensity weeks. And then these next two, it's like, we're not just going to walk and do yoga, maybe a little bit more intense than that. Those are great options. But okay, we're just going to dial things back a little bit, knowing that there are other things going on internally that take precedence. And then, hey, when we get on the back end of this, then we can push hard again.
Yeah, exactly. And empowering your clients and just feeling empowered in your body and understanding that from a female perspective is huge, because you can push in the times when, you're in that first half, and you can also work with your coach to modify and have a two-way communication system of, hey, this is how I'm feeling right now, in conjunction to all other life stressors going on too, poor sleep, which will influence recovery and output in your training as well, which can happen, during that second half of your cycle too. So, and then obviously utilizing nutrition as a strategy to support, your training, as you always should, but especially during that second half of your cycle to get the most out of your training and recovery.
I love it. Okay. So along those same lines, what types of things can our female clients and athletes do from a nutritional perspective to help support their body and just make sure that they're really fueling themselves appropriately during these various menstrual phases? Totally.
So during the first half of your cycle, so follicular phase, you are more carbohydrate sensitive. And because of this, your body is able to tap into those stores better, which is what also helps you, increase your power output during that time. So obviously you want to train or fuel with protein, carbohydrates prior to any high intensity training, and honor that. Now it becomes less of a, time sensitive fueling strategy during the first half as it is during the second half, because in the second half of your cycle, with progesterone increasing, you're a little bit more catabolic. So you want to make sure you're definitely fueling with protein before your weight training sessions, before your cardio sessions, because you don't want to start breaking down muscle, obviously. So making sure you're eating pre-workout, within 30 minutes, even if it's just, like 1 cupped hand of carbohydrates. So like 15, 30 grams, whatever it is. Same with protein, 30 grams of protein, 15 grams of protein, right? It doesn't have to be something huge, but especially for those who work out first thing in the morning and might not eat before training, during that second half of the cycle is very important for you to do so you can best adapt from the training and have the energy. I love it. So really just an easy way to put it is like consistent balanced meals at consistent meal times during the second half of your cycle has to be a priority. And you want to make sure you're eating at consistent meal times because you don't want an added stressor on your body of fasting too long or, dipping too low, your blood sugar dipping too low because your body's already in a stress sensitive state. Let's not add on to that by, restricting calories, restricting carbohydrates, fasting too long, etc.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And that's, people love to argue about stuff on the internet. I don't know if you've noticed that. People love to argue on the internet, but I really like to use that term fueling with my clients, with my athletes now, getting away from, even if they want fat loss, still getting them in this mindset of you have to fuel your body appropriately. And so I love that you're talking about that throughout the cycle, right? But especially on the back end, because what most people don't understand is that stress is stress at some level. So just because you're not stressing your body with a workout doesn't mean your body isn't in a stress state based on what's going on internally. So I love that you're talking about that and talking about fueling appropriately throughout the cycle, but especially on those back 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. And especially as, an athlete, you think of like, oh, this feels easy, because what feels hard to an athlete is like you're on the floor exhausted, right? That is like, oh, that was a hard workout. Your body doesn't feel the same. That's like a very high workout, but training sessions can still be tiring when your heart rate's up. That's a stressor on your body. So it's like, even though your rate of perceived exertion as an athlete might be a little bit lower for, a certain training session, your body still is seeing that as a stressor, even though it might not feel as hard. This is something, I am still learning, because I am, I love training hard, and I'm still learning that, like, okay, when I push myself too hard, I notice I'm, bloated, can't sleep, brain fog, like all of these other symptoms come with it. And I am now only making that connection after going years, like decade almost, of like not even understanding what hormones are doing and why am I feeling this way? So it's really important for everyone to just be tuned into their body, where they're at in their cycle, and how they feel after training, and making note of how are they adapting? How are they feeling outside of training? Like in terms of their mental clarity, their sleep, their energy, all of this. So all things to consider. One thing I did not touch on in terms of training throughout the cycle is during ovulation, right before ovulation, when estrogen peaks, estrogen can also increase joint laxity. So just something to consider as a coach is like, okay, if you have, high intensity impact training, whether it's plyometrics or a lot of jump sequences or cutting or whatever it is, especially under fatigue, something to notice or something to take note of when training female clients. Just, ask where they're at in their cycle and see. Not saying they can't cut or jump or do sprint or do any of that during that time, because obviously you can, but just make note of how's their, recovery. First of all, how's their readiness? Are they able to do this? And just honor where they're at, because it is a factor. So something to think about. But
so this actually goes seamlessly into my next question, because probably a couple years ago now, it's scary how long I've been doing this, but I had my good friend Menachem Brody come on, and we talked about, the menstrual cycle and how it impacts some of the athletes that he works with. He works with a lot of cyclists, and a lot of my clients at the gym and people that go to the gym, a lot of my female clients were like, oh my gosh, thank you for having this show. Thank you for talking about this. And then they were like passive aggressive, like, well, how come you never talk to me about my cycle? And I'm like, okay. So I guarantee there's a lot of guys that are listening to this show right now, and they're like, this is important. I can see the role. I can see the value in this. At the same time, they're thinking, how do I go about asking somebody about this? So walk us through that. How does a guy approach one of his female clients or athletes and or just start this discussion about, where are you at in your cycle? How can I take better care of you with your training? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, literally just what you said was perfect. Where are you at in your cycle? I want to make sure I'm, adapting and modifying your training to best support your body. And that will empower her so much to be open about it, to say, here's where I'm at, here's how I'm feeling. And honestly, I think it might be more of a little bit more difficult than that, because a lot of women honestly aren't tracking their cycle. And hopefully they are starting to see the importance of that now, as this topic is being more discussed. But step one is, okay, maybe have the conversation of like, are you tracking your cycle? Let's utilize your hormone fluctuation, your natural hormone fluctuations, to best support your body and getting the results that you want. So whatever is most important to that client, you talk to them about how to best support them to get the most out of their main goal, because that's what's most important, right, to them.
Yeah, for sure.
And so having that conversation of getting to know their specific goals, which you do anyway, now say, okay, now let's talk about where you're at in your cycle, because I know specific fueling training strategies can best support your adaptations to get you to where you want to go in a way that feels a lot better for you. So we're not breaking you down. We're allowing your body to recover and get stronger. And it will feel a lot more effortless to the woman when you sync your training and nutrition for with your cycle. Other than that, if you don't know, you could have this, very intense training session that will support them in getting to where they want to go, like supporting their goals, obviously. But you could schedule that in the time where they're like, their rate of perceived exertion is higher. They're feeling fatigued already. They, they're not in the mood. They don't have the mental clarity. Like they didn't sleep. And then you're just adding this other life stressor or adding this other stressor onto their body. Sure. So having a simple conversation of like, okay, let's start, utilizing this strategy to best support your body. And any woman would be receptive to that.
Yeah. See, I love that. And I think one of the things that you mentioned is so important. Number one, well, actually a couple things, but number one is talking about it with context. And this is something that I talk to every coach that I work with about, is finding context in why you do things. So I think universally as an industry, we can say a squat is a good activity, right? But why it's important is very contextual, right? Mm-hmm. Based on the person you're working with, because why a squat is beneficial to a fat loss client versus a hypertrophy client versus a power lifter versus an athlete. Well, the squat is universally beneficial, but how you would rationalize that or help different clients and athletes understand the value of it is different based on the context. And I think this is a great point for you. It's like, hey, whatever their goals are, try and give them context and help sell it based around, hey, at this time of the month, you're going to be your strongest. You're going to be able to, tolerate the most volume. Whatever the case is, if you can give them context, I think you're going to immediately get more buy-in from this as well.
100%. And that is honestly one of the most important things, because how your client, your athlete perceives the workout and the importance of it is based from their own lens. You can hammer in the message as much as you want. They're not going to hear it unless they see the value in it for themselves, their goals from their own perspective. So you have to get to know your individual human being that you're working with, and learn just what's important to them and hear the words that they're saying, and truly hear the words that they're saying, because that will give you the best tool to have a proper and supportive conversation with them. Because everyone's different. Some people want to get stronger and will say, I want to get stronger. I want to feel stronger. Cool. You want to feel stronger? Let's get after it during this phase. You want to grow a butt? Cool. This is the best time for that, right? You want to get faster, whatever it is, So
yes,
hammering in that message of just seeing what's important to your client and utilizing this as a tool and as a strategy to best get the most out of their training.
For sure. Okay, so let's take this one step further, because while I do feel like there are more people talking about training around the menstrual cycle and that sort of thing, one thing I don't hear people talk as much about is menopause. So obviously, we all get older. I don't think anybody has hacked that just yet. And if they do, they're going to be the wealthiest person on the planet. But when it comes to menopause, I would love to hear kind of a general breakdown there. Like, what's changing inside the body? What's going on? And then from there, how do we need to adapt our training as a result of that?
Yeah. So menopause is going 12 months without a period, at the age of around 50-ish. Give or take 10 years, right. 5 years, whatever. And 10 years before you even hit post-menopause is your transition. So you have your reproductive years, then you have this period of perimenopause, which is the transition phase, and then you hit post-menopause. So during this transition phase, your sex hormones are naturally declining, because it varies. And I have this beautiful picture in my head of this study. You can see these up and down spikes of what a female's hormones look like during perimenopause. And it can feel confusing because your cycles are irregular. Sometimes they're shorter and then they get longer. So it's really hard to cycle sync during this time, your training, whatever. Right. One thing to note is track how you feel, track your training, and obviously you want to progress slowly, and not slowly, but progressive overload during that time, and always is so important. But during the time of perimenopause, when your hormones are fluctuating quite drastically, that's something to consider in terms of fueling your body appropriately. Because again, you don't want to add another stressor of fasting too long, or not eating enough for your needs, not eating enough for your training demands, right? So understanding that this normal fluctuation is happening, and it can affect your mood, your sleep, your recovery, your adaptations, and just knowing that your body is beautifully designed to do this, and there's nothing wrong with you. First of all, that's so important for women to realize. Right. And they can still get the results they want. They just need to modify and adjust their training, their lifestyle, their nutrition a little bit in accordance to their phase of life. And a lot of women that I work with still try to do this high intensity workout day in and day out because it worked for them in their 20s. And when they're in this phase of life, their body is a little bit more stress sensitive. Their body is changing. They need a bigger stimulus, whether it's protein intake or heavier lifting to build and retain muscle and strength. They need to really manage, sleep hygiene and other life stressors as best as possible to give them the best foundation of getting the results that they want. So, and this obviously goes for anybody, but especially you just have to be more dialed in, honestly, during that period. And then as you approach menopause and postmenopause, your hormones naturally decline. So you don't get the, robust benefits of estrogen. However, you can use nutrition, you can use training, you can use these external strategies to not necessarily mimic the benefits of estrogen, but to still support your body in building muscle, supporting your heart health, supporting your immune health, supporting your bone health, etc. So nutrition and training is are both powerful strategies to make that transition of your hormones naturally declining a lot more smooth. And it all comes down to first managing your total stress load. Because if you're, if that is too high, nothing else is going to work in your favor. And the reason for that is because all of our hormones, stem from our brain connection, whether it's our brain to our thyroid, whether it's our brain to our ovaries, brain to our adrenal glands, which pump out our stress hormones. Your body will always prioritize keeping you safe. And with that, if you are too stressed too often, your body will pump out your stress hormone, which will then downregulate your thyroid hormone. Your thyroid hormone runs your metabolism, so downregulates, slows down your metabolism, and your body will downregulate reproduction. And that downregulates your sex hormones, your estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, which then affect your ability to train hard, recover hard. It affects your sleep, your mood, your motivation. So again, stress is the baseline of what needs to be managed, especially during that time of perimenopause and postmenopause.
I mean, it just keeps coming back to stress, doesn't it?
Always.
at every level, at every stage in the game, you realize stress management is a real part of all this. If you want to see success, whether it's getting stronger, achieving the body comp that you want, just enjoying life in the gym more, if your stress is just way out of control, you're not going to see the results that you want. And there's definitely times in life when it's more obvious than others, as I am in my middle 40s at this point in time, you definitely notice if I am not sleeping well, if I'm not fueling my body appropriately, it shows off a lot more than it did when I was 20 and could, do all the fun things and stay out super late on Saturday and still go in and squat pretty heavy on Sunday. Those days are not there anymore. So coming back to that idea of stress management at all phases of life, but especially in some of these key periods, I think is really important.
Totally. Yes. And exactly like you said, like in your early 20s, it's different, but it's different not only because your body's different, but you don't have the life stressors you do. You don't have the kids, the family, the aging parents, the job, the finances, the bills, the list can go on. So really just dialing down, making sure your body feels safe, supported, nourished, fueled, and using training as a way to promote all of those things and, benefit your mental health, physical health, strength, mentally, physically, all of that is so important. So yes, hammering in that message of managing total stress for sure.
Very important. Very important. Okay, so one thing you've mentioned a couple of times is intermittent fasting. And I really want to get your thoughts on this because one thing that I've noticed, I've been doing this 20 plus years now, is that a lot of people assume what is true in the fat loss space is universally true with all spaces, right? So you see a lot of people that are taking the intermittent fasting message and they're taking it across the board and making it universally applicable. So I would love to hear your thoughts on just intermittent fasting as a whole, and then maybe certain populations that it would be better for, as well as maybe certain populations that it would be less appropriate for.
Yes. So this is probably one of the biggest things I have changed my mind on over the last 6 years. So I delved into intermittent fasting, 2015, 16, and then started implementing it when I was in grad school. So talk about grad school, starting my own business. Oh, this is also a great time to fast because it helps longevity and mental clarity. Right. So I did 16 hours of fasting every day, if not longer, because then, you don't get hungry is the thing, right? So because you're running on stress hormones during your fast, especially as a woman, you don't get hungry because cortisol is giving you that energy. So whatever, anyway, long story short, what I have changed my mind on is intermittent fasting is not as beneficial for certain populations than it is for your obese, your insulin resistant, or men for body composition purposes. Now, intermittent fasting is not for, obviously, if you have any history of disordered eating disorders, if you're lean, have irregular cycles due to whether it's amenorrhea or just low body composition, longer term fasting, not appropriate for that population. Or if you are in a phase of life where you are highly stressed, also not appropriate. So it can be appropriate for body composition, like I said, for men, if you have insulin resistance, if you're obese, etc. It's a tool. It is not the holy grail. It's a tool in your toolbox that you can utilize to confine your eating window and maybe reduce calories for these certain people. Right. So when it comes to athletes who are lean and general population who's already lean, intermittent fasting for body composition might actually backfire because it is a stressor, because your body will start to downregulate certain functions, especially like your metabolism, if you're just not eating enough in general. And when you're compressing your eating window to 6 to 8 hours, that's kind of hard to reach your protein goals, to build and maintain muscle, which run your metabolism. And maybe to even just get enough calories that is needed, especially if you're an athlete. Now, you can sync your fasting / not eating window to your circadian rhythm in terms of, eat when you're awake, don't eat when you're asleep, but more so end your eating window about 3 to 4 hours before bedtime. And this will help your body we have like this natural migrating motor complex. It's what it's called, the MMC pathway. What this pathway does is naturally cleanse and clear our digestive tract in between meals. So this process takes about 4 hours. Well, it starts 2 hours after you finish your last bite of food, and then it takes another 2-ish hours to complete a cycle. So allowing your body maybe 4 hours between meals and allowing your body 4 hours before bedtime, because this process naturally slows down as we sleep, this can be helpful. So a 12-hour overnight fast, you end eating 3 to 4 hours before bed, eat breakfast within, 1 to 2 hours of waking up, assuming you're in bed for 8 hours, hopefully. So that is something supportive for most people, if not all people. And when you start to prolong that up to 16 hours, you start getting a little bit of a stress response, which is fine short-term, acutely. But if you do this every single day, day in and day out, especially maybe during the second half of your cycle where you're already more stress sensitive, your body will listen because it's so beautifully designed to pay attention to your surroundings, and it will start to downregulate other functions. So initially you may find that intermittent fasting is working for you. You feel great, energized, mentally clear. All of a sudden you're starting to gain weight, holding on to fat, become more fatigued, brain fog, sleep's getting impaired. All of these things might start happening. So again, N=1, listen to your body, and just know that intermittent fasting is a tool. It's not the holy grail, especially when it comes to body composition.
I love it. Wow. That was a very thorough answer. So one other topic that I'm interested in is fueling like young female athletes, because I've got a young female athlete in my house now. She's not quite a teenager yet, but getting close. And I've worked with, literally hundreds, if not thousands over the years of, late teens, early 20s. How do you talk to them about fueling their body, right? Because so much of our society and social media is driven around a certain look, right? Or a certain body composition. How do you have these discussions with them about fueling appropriately to take care of their bodies? And like you've used the term honor numerous times, and I like that. How do you teach them to honor their bodies and fuel them appropriately and use it as a vehicle for performance, not just like a specific look or body composition?
Yeah. This is hard because, as you know, when you're growing up, when you're younger, when you don't have this like perspective, you don't have hindsight perspective. You just are like, oh, this is what I want right now. This might get me to where I want to go, without knowing the repercussions of the future and not necessarily caring about the repercussions of the future. So it unfortunately it comes down to education, of course, and empowering the athlete. Again, talking to them in a way that makes them feel like, oh, this is going to get me the best result for what's most important to me, because they'll listen to that. A lot of athletes, and I'm just thinking about all my past teammates, like no matter how many times you tell them eating is important, they're not going to do it if they don't want to. But it's like, you have to make sure they are well educated and feel empowered and understand the repercussions of not fueling appropriately, which can lead to increased injury, poor training adaptations. Oh, you're working so hard here. You're putting in all this effort. We want to make sure you're seeing the results from putting in this effort. This is what you need to do. You need to make sure you're eating appropriately, all these things, right? Or it's, you want to get faster on the field. Okay, well, if you're not eating, appropriately, again, however you want to say it, you're not going to get you're not going to be able to hit those top speeds. You need carbohydrates to hit those top speeds, to hit that high intensity. And if you don't hit that high intensity in training, you're not going to hit it on the field. You might, but you want to train to that level to push your capacity more. So it's really making sure, again, you just have to communicate to the individual in front of you of what's important to them, but also explaining that, relative energy deficiency in sport, RED-S, is real. And it happens to not only athletes, general population too, who want to take on fasted workouts, intermittent fasting, low carb, keto, all at the same time to reach this body composition goal. But everything else in their life suffers, whether it's their energy, their training adaptation, their sleep. And then it really does affect, especially if you have red S, like it's going to affect your heart health, your bone health, your immune health. All of those things sound a little, too far in the future for like a young athlete, but
right.
Talking about injury prevention, reaching their fullest potential is maybe more relatable, and that will land with them more than, oh, you need to protect your bone health. Like, unless they've had a fracture or something like broken a bone, that might land, but your heart health and all of that stuff might not land with them. So,
yeah. Well, again, it comes back to context.
Yeah.
Right? If you're talking about something that's potentially 40, 50, 60 years down the line, they don't have the scope or the perspective to think about that. Versus, oh, you want to get faster, or you want to get stronger, or you want to come back better off this injury. Like you said, those are things that are a little bit more shorter term, immediate gratification. And hopefully it gets you the buy-in you need to start building those habits that we know are going to be valuable long term, but maybe sell them on the short term vision, knowing that you'll get some long term payoff.
Exactly. So it all comes down to just your relationship with your athlete or client and communicating and finding that common ground of what's important to them.
Yep. Okay, I love it. All right, big question time.
Let's do it.
If you could alter the space-time continuum and give young Julia Glanz one piece of advice, what would it be?
Okay, I knew you were going to ask this, and I was thinking about it last night, and I was like, you know what? I don't have an answer. And then something just hit me like a brick wall, and I was like, oh, wow. I need this advice right now. Essentially, I would tell myself, stop comparing yourself to people that are 10 years ahead of you. Like, enjoy where you're at right now. Embrace the journey. And this goes, for my younger self, trying to be this college strength coach, trying to be this registered dietitian, trying to have this online business, trying to reach all these amazing goals that light me up, but I want them right now because I see what's possible. Allowing myself grace in the journey when I was younger, and honestly, still to this day, will not only make the journey more, enjoyable, but it will also reduce, my total stress load too, which, as we talked about, is very important. So that's what I would say. Just stop comparing yourself to anyone really, but especially people that are, years and years ahead of you on their own journey.
Yeah. Well, I think we both know the comparison game isn't great for us for a lot of reasons. And one thing that I always have to remind myself of, because I think we all get caught up in it at some point in time, right, is just reminding yourself that everybody's situation is unique, right? So even at my age, looking around, oh man, that person is killing it, whatever, but their life situation is totally different than mine, right? Maybe they have no kids, or maybe they're single. Like, just stop comparing yourself to everybody else. Like, play your own game, be comfortable with where you're at, and have like the long-term vision for where you're going, and just a little baby steps every day, right?
100%. Yes. Trust yourself, trust your journey, and baby steps at a time, and you're exactly where you need to be. And that's a constant reminder that, I still have to tell myself, and definitely would want to tell my younger self.
Yes. Very cool. Okay. Last but not least, lightning round. So in your case, I got 4 questions, fairly short answers, but let's go. Number 1, the best part of working primarily online is?
I get to work from anywhere.
Ah, yes. Yes. Because you are everywhere.
I am. I travel a lot.
It looks like. Yes. As you should. I love it. Okay. Number 2, how has all that great relationship advice I passed off to you gone? Has that helped?
I love talking to you, and maybe we should start a, love preparations podcast next.
That'll be our side hustle.
Yes.
For those of you that are not in the know, which is basically all of you, one of our mutually good friends, Eric Otter, got married last year, had a wedding reception in Memphis, and I got to hang out with Julia and Eric, her boyfriend, for quite a long period of time, and there were probably a few margaritas consumed, and if we could have recorded a podcast of you just asking me relationship questions, I think it would have hit really well.
Oh, it would have taken off. It would have been so helpful.
I was definitely waxing philosophical, so maybe it's probably a good thing that that's not out there, but
we can bring it back anytime. Just let me know.
I love it. Okay, number 3. When was the last time you were on the soccer pitch?
Actually, a couple weeks ago, randomly, because I'll play like random pickup games. They're just not as fun because you can't, like, you touch someone on the arm and it's a foul, and I just get annoyed. So it's not the same as competing on a Friday night in college. It's not.
It's not the same. Okay, last but not least, number 4, what's next for Julia Glanz? What are you working on? What are you excited about? Anything?
Yes, so much. So I am coming out with a brand new course that is truly like my heart and soul into this course. It has taken everything that I have learned about women's health, women's hormones, women's physiology, everything I've done with my clients, and I've created a course, the Hormone Balance Blueprint. And this is a 4-phase course that helps women optimize the key hormones affecting their energy, their weight, their metabolism, their mood, their menstrual cycle in a way that educates them, makes them feel empowered in their choices. Because again, every individual needs a plan for their individual life in order to make it work and in a way that's actually sustainable for them. So truly teaching women how to create a plan for them based off their own unique individual needs is so important, because there's so many women out there that are taking advice from the internet, that are going to the extremes or feel like they have to go to the extremes, whether it's nutrition or exercise routines. And it leaves them feeling burnt out and starting to gain weight and just not seeing the results that they want. So getting this information and this course out there is really exciting to me. I'll also have a free masterclass as well, just to help women understand what hormone imbalances even are, why do they happen, and kind of like what to do about it. So really educating and helping women understand and feel empowered in their body is huge for me, to get that message out there. And then in the future, I think creating a certification. And this is the first time I am saying this out loud in public, but it is on the horizon. And so I'm putting it out there.
I love it. Well, now you're going to have built-in accountability, because myself and everybody that listens to this show is going to be on you now about when that cert goes
When's it coming out? Give me a few years, but it'll come.
Right. I love it. Well, Julia, it's been amazing catching up with you. As always, just love our conversations. It was great having you on. Where can my listeners find out more about you and all the great stuff you're working on?
Yes, everything is all on Instagram. Come hang out with me at Julia Glanz, and I post all the good things on women's health, hormones, metabolism, and any updates that's going on in my life. I'll share right over there.
I love it. Well, we'll make sure we get that link in the show notes. And again, Julia, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.